Hi, I'm Chuck Colson, introducing a series entitled Doing the Right Thing. We're in a great ethical collapse today, and everybody's angry at government because we see excesses in government. But remember, we live in a democracy. In a democracy, you get the government you deserve. So it's more a reflection on us. And the people in our society who really understand this are Christians. We understand that the cult, that is the belief system, is what spawns and builds a culture, and the culture is what spawns politics. So when we look at politics and we get mad, we better get mad at ourselves. We better repent. And we better figure out in our churches how we can be sources of virtue that spill out into our society, that bring righteousness and justice to bear on the world around us. I think if you go through this 6-part series and you really understand the cause of the economic collapse in 2008, the knowability of truth, the question the Apostle Paul asked, if I know what is true, why did I do what is wrong? So how do you cultivate virtue so that you have the will to do what is right? Then how you live it out in life issues, which are so crucial to us today in the church. Vital, and there's a great series on life. John Erickson Todd is in it, and she's just terrific. So is Dr. Chris Hook from Mayo Clinic. And then we go into the workplace, what it means to be virtuous in the workplace, and then most important, what it means to be virtuous in government, because lives are at stake, how we handle human rights and human dignity. This 6-part series can equip you and your church to be able to make the case for virtue in society. Where's it going to come from? Where it's always come from. Christian people living out their faith. That's been the history of Western civilization. We got to do it again, folks, because I see the whole country in peril of collapsing for lack of virtuous living and righteousness and justice. And the wellspring of that has to be, as it has always been, the moral conscience of society, the Church of Jesus Christ. Let's do our job. Let's go out there and teach people what it means to do the right thing, to live justly, to defend truth, and to do the gospel. God bless you.
Well, I don't think anyone can deny that we have a problem here.
We're in an ethical mess.
The financial crisis has rocked the world and shaken markets worldwide. It has caused an upheaval in millions of lives. What went wrong, and why did it go wrong?
At every level, they were deceiving the people they were dealing with at every level.
Almost everyone in a position of financial authority embraced it. Our Federal Reserve saw no evil. The ratings agencies, as mentioned, stamped their highest imprimatur on these mortgages. They saw no evil. Wall Street, which was feasting on these transactions, not only saw no evil, but saw a great deal of virtue, which could be quantified in billions of dollars. That was the virtue of it.
At the heart of this is an unethical series of acts. At the heart of it was an incredibly unethical act of Wall Street in packaging securities they knew to be fragile and often worthless, or largely worthless. They shouldn't have sold them in the first place. If they were selling them, they should not at the same time have been selling them short.
You know, in the aftermath of the bust, in the dark days 2008 and early 2009, you'd hear our public officials say over and over, let's not have any recriminations. Let's not point fingers of blame. Without accountability, we are all treading water in this murky, lukewarm, milky sea of collectivism, and nothing good comes of it. Let us have individual responsibility.
Why is there this seemingly widespread moral collapse in America?
Many Americans, at some level, at least claim to believe in what's called moral relativism, the denial that there is any such thing as moral truth or an objective moral truth, that all we have is opinion. There are no right and wrong answers to moral questions, just opinions or feelings.
20 years ago, a friend of mine gave $5 million to Harvard Business School to set up a chair on ethics.
I called him and said, you're wasting your money, because an institution today committed to philosophical relativism of the kind Dr. George just described can't possibly teach ethics. Ethics are based on absolute standards of right and wrong.
I'm a graduate of Harvard Business School. I graduated with high distinction, so I was named a Baker Scholar, so I was in the top 5% of the class. Unfortunately, the school does not subscribe to the idea of ultimate morality, of ultimate good, which is good in and of itself, outside of any context, and which is translatable across cultures, times, it's applicable everywhere. They do not subscribe to that concept. Problem is, there's no mandate. There's no fundamental agreement on the way the world works. And so you're reduced to discussing practical behavior in certain situations.
To be sure, I think most people don't wake up at the start of the day to go into their office to say, today I'm going to be unethical. Today I'm going to commit the world's biggest fraud. It's a series of steps that takes place over time, at which point someone finally crosses a line and goes too far. So what's happened is, the way we've been taught since we were little is we're taught that the opposite of a fact is an opinion. And facts are empirical statements, and everything that's good, true, beautiful, right, wrong, kind, compassionate are just matters of opinion. It's embedded in the way we think.
We've got to work on this problem in every dimension. It can't just begin in business school. It's got to begin in homes, in churches, in schools. At every level, we have to be working together to rebuild a consensus around a sound and coherent ethic. How did we get here? How did we get into this situation of incoherence?
What's happened is that over time, the Christian moral foundations that allow you to make the kinds of ethical and moral judgments that you're talking about here have deteriorated.
Why are we surprised when there's a lack of ethics in government, Wall Street, the lenders, people, the prisons? It's an inescapable consequence of neglecting moral training. We're in an ethical mess because of it.
Is there moral truth? Is there some foundation for ethical beliefs that all of us can agree to? There was one man in modern American history who concluded from a prison cell that there was a law we have to live by, both written and unwritten.
My uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., wrote a letter when he was incarcerated in Birmingham, Alabama. There was a lot of strife and racial tension there. Black people, we were called Negroes in those days, were being slaughtered, literally. And so it was during these times that my uncle was leading the protest and saying that this was really unjust. During my uncle's lifetime, when he had to consider whether he would obey the law or disobey the law, if the law of the land was something that was going to harm what he called the least of these, then he would go to the higher law, the divine law, the natural law. Dr. King would always say, if a law is unjust, it is our moral responsibility to resist the unjust law. And that is the basis of the civil rights movement.
According to the tradition of natural law, there are great moral truths, including truths about the fundamental dignity of human beings, that while revealed in Scripture, are also, at least in principle, knowable by reason itself.
What I think King proves more than anything else, that there is a truth which is knowable. And one of the things that's crucial here, if we're going to rebuild any kind of an ethical consensus in our common lives together, is that we agree there is some standard that we're going to live by. So truth has got to be knowable for there to be ethics.
So if you say that it's always wrong to torture children for the fun of it, that statement is true. And it's true in every culture. It's true whether we want it to be true or not. It's simply dead on true. If there were no truth, or if we couldn't know it, ordinary life would be virtually impossible.
Let's assume the moral relativist is correct, there is no truth. What happens to a society that really embraces that and carries it to its logical conclusion?
You'd find yourself unwilling or unable to condemn the crimes of Hitler, you know, the gratuitous murders of millions of people, or of Stalin, or Mao, of Pol Pot, or the terrorist attacks from Al-Qaeda.
If you're a purely accepted moral relativist position, then you have no ground on which to stand to say why another person is wrong in whatever they do. There's either a truth about man and the nature of what a good society and a good life is, or all decisions are made based on power.
The Bible says it's written on the heart. It really is something we know, and this is what King was appealing to.
It had been proposed perhaps it's written on the heart. However, an increasingly popular view, especially in evolutionary biology, is that it's written on the genes. How do we proceed from there?
That's a very good question. These things, as the questioner suggests, may be written on our beings by the process of evolution as we've come to learn to live together and so on. Good question. What about that argument?
We experience ourselves as moral agents. We experience ourselves as free, as able to make choices between right and wrong, good and evil. I'll give you an earthy example. A dog makes decisions, but they don't make free choices, right? A dog looks at the food in front of them and says, there's a lion back there. Well, I won't eat it because I don't want to get eaten by the lion, okay? But no dog looks at another dog and thinks, wow, she's beautiful, but I think I'll wait till marriage. Okay? That doesn't happen.
Almost no human does
never
that.
heard that analogy.
If we're talking about ethics, we have to understand that there's got to be a standard of what ought to be beyond personal survival, or beyond personal autonomy, or any of the code words we hear on campuses today or in public discourse. There's got to be some higher value, and there'll never be an ethical standard unless there is a truth which can be known by all, a truth that cannot not be known because it's true. There's a certain way the world is made, and seeking that which is truth is the great goal of life. And out of that comes an ethical system.
If truth is knowable, and by extension, therefore, right is knowable, then the next question is whether we have the discipline and the will to do what is right. Chuck Colson, one of our hosts, was a key figure in the great Watergate scandal. He was special counsel to President Nixon. He went to prison. He faced this question with some dramatic consequences.
I remember when the president, 4 or 5 of us in the office, and the president was exploding over something that had gotten out and was in the hands of the Brookings Institution, and he turned to Bob Holdham and he said, Bob, have we got a team in place that can go in and get those documents back? Then I later realized that was a time when I should have stopped and said, wait a minute, Mr. President, think about the consequences of this. But I did not. I ended up going to prison. Why? I think you can be so self-righteous that you don't see what's really going on. You become oblivious to your own insensitivities because you're sure nobody can compromise you. Human beings have the infinite capacity of self-rationalization, and that's exactly what I did.
So I see a fascinating tension because everyone in this room, they're the nation's best and brightest, all out saying you could do it, and high self-esteem and good grades. And yet there's a common theme throughout these panelists that sooner or later we drop the ball. We do that which we know we ought not to do.
That once you begin to break the code, you'll feel badly about it the first time, a little less badly about it the second time, a little less badly about it the third time. And that's the experience of human corruption.
My first response to this idea of removing restraints is, how's that working for you? Because the fact of the matter is, observationally, it's resulting in more pain, more brokenness, more harm to the individuals involved, to the society in general, than pretty much anything else that I can think of that's happened in society in my lifetime. It is unutterably destructive.
It raises an intriguing question. What about the transformation of the stubborn human will?
How do you know what's good, and then how do you do it?
When you have a common foundation and everyone operates with a worldview that is similar in the sense that there is right and there is wrong, it's amazing what you can accomplish as an organization.
My name is Sterling Knox. I'm serving 120 months for second-degree unintentional murder.
My name is Chow Lee. I'm serving 204 months for second-degree intentional murder.
My name is Steve Janicek. I'm serving 100 months for a cruel, cowardly, senseless act of assault.
My name is Bill. I'm serving 88 months for secondary possession of methamphetamines.
I care now. I do care now. And what prompted that change? A newfound value on life.
Knowing that there's a God there that has forgiven me and that shows me love every day. Knowing what it is to love one another. No longer following a corrupt belief system that is nothing but causing pain and harm to other people.
I have a renewed faith in Christ, and it helps me to refocus on what's important. And I've spent enough time taken away from other people. God gave me a lot of gifts, and it's time for me to start giving them to put them for better use other than to manipulate people for self-seeking issues.
It's always accomplished in community, and it's always accomplished in part as well by teaching them to control how they think.
When faith and reason are operating well together, when reason is in control of the passions, then the passionate aspect of man can lead us to do great things, to do really great things, heroic things, because we're passionate for them.
Today we're going to be discussing the ethical implications of how we treat one another as human beings. These are pressing questions, particularly at a time when medical costs are rising and increasing numbers of people are in need of services. How do we decide who gets treated and who does not? Who makes the decisions, and what are the standards we follow? This is nothing less than the question of life and death for each one of us.
I was the SOD, surgeon of the day, and the nurse said, "Doc, we got a very badly injured guy out here. You better come out right away." So I went out and took a look at him, and he was lying in a stretcher, and he was really badly injured. And I talked to him, and he said, "Well, I think I left my legs in the helicopter, Doc. You might just as well have left them in the helicopter because they're no good." He needed to have both lower extremities amputated. He needed, as we found out from radiograms, what had gone in here was now inside his skull, so in his frontal lobe, so he needed a craniectomy and debridement of his brain, and he needed to have this eye taken out. And so he needed the urologist, we needed the neurosurgeon, the orthopedic surgeon, myself, and we went to work. Well, after we'd finished, the chief of professional services, a lieutenant colonel, when he put his arm around me and said, "I think you should know that the boys think maybe you should have let that fellow go last night." I was sort of, oh my God, I never even thought of that.
At the foundation of our thinking about ethics is the basic principle that every human being possesses a profound, inherent, and equal dignity and a right to life.
How do we adapt the concept that all life is precious and all human beings are equal before God in this new world?
Either we are going to stick at the basis of our ethics and at the base of our medicine with the proposition that every human being has profound, inherent, and equal dignity, or we're going to abandon that in favor of the view that was once associated with the movement known as eugenics.
The eugenics movement did not go away. It really changed how it expressed itself. When we engage in something like that, we have already subscribed to utilitarian calculus that says it's okay to let us use genetic information to determine whether some people can exist for the use of others or don't have the right to exist at all.
Are we willing to sacrifice the lives of some human beings for the sake of others? And that means, are we willing to give up the sanctity of human life ethic in favor of an ethics of eugenics?
A proper understanding of who the human person is and what the person is in relationship to others and to society. If we lose that, and we are losing that, it becomes very, very dangerous, especially for certain groups, the unborn, the elderly.
I think this discussion is the most important one you can engage in ethics today. Unfortunately, a lot of people put slogans and catchphrases like pro-life, pro-choice. It's much deeper than that. The question is, what does it mean to be human?
Is it possible to have ethical standards which govern our behavior in the marketplace?
This was 2002, in the midst of kind of Enron, WorldCom, and Tyco. There was a CEO of the company who had charges brought against him related to his personal tax situation, which basically led to the uncovering of a major fraud, theft of $600 million by the CFO and the CEO.
We have a business model in this country which is just heartbreakingly unethical.
We really do live in an age of obsessive individualism. Corporate executives go in to see how much money they can make out of a corporation rather than what that corporation can do.
When you lose a sense of trust, market economies fail. Market economies rely upon an ethical structure.
But the market also both requires and nurtures another set of virtues. It requires the virtue of service. It requires the virtue of hard work and discipline and diligence. It requires the virtue of creativity and innovation.
If you're only thinking in cost benefit, then I think what you're doing is you're reducing the business merely to its profit-making element. But as Peter Drucker says, the goal of a business is to create a customer. And the goal of a manager is not merely to make profit, but to create sustainable value.
The historic classical model that we follow in the West is one that cares deeply about producing products and services that are of benefit to the public, that takes care of its working force, that invests back in the community in which it resides. This whole idea of being rooted in the community, this whole idea about caring about the people that helped you rise up the corporate ladder, those are good models. That's what we have to honor that.
Doing the right things, that's what makes you happy. So you do good things by having a good business, and you do good things by giving back in a proper way to a good community.
Maybe it's the answer, which is that at the top of these enterprises, you need virtuous people.
Of course.
And there's no way around it, that the system itself will not, by itself, by its natural financial incentives, generate virtue.
But you know what? To produce such people, there's only one institution that can really do it well, the institution of the family.
Right. It's the family, religion, culture. This is what has to be transformed. And when we transform that, then a market economy can flourish, because free societies require free people. And the market cannot create free people.
Can government actually be the instrument of justice, of good, of human flourishing? To start the discussion, we hear again from one of our own panelists, our co-host Chuck Colson.
Just before I left the White House, the president sent me on a mission to visit the Soviet Union. We were locked into a very, very difficult situation with the Soviets. The president had been there in 1972 in the spring, had set up a strategic arms agreement. I ended up in the Kremlin one afternoon negotiating with Vasily Kuznetsov, who was the hardline Soviet negotiator. And we sat at one of those long tables with all the Americans on one side and all the Soviets on the other side, and went for about 2 hours. This guy was really tough, and he kept saying to me, pound the table, he'd say, "Mr. Colson, you come here and you're trying to interfere with our domestic affairs." And I kept countering him. I kept saying, no, human rights aren't domestic affairs. You don't give human rights to people in the government, and you can't take them away. Human rights are God-given. All of a sudden, he hit the table. He said, okay, Mr. Colson, you can tell your president we'll do our part. And as a result of that, within days thereafter, they released 35,000 Soviet Jews. But what I learned out of that was that the unique contribution that America makes to the world, and it is unique, is to promote the idea that people are created equal, endowed by they're created with certain inalienable rights. This is the fundamental ethic on which the Western civilization was built.
The first task of government is to kind of create order and secure rights and liberty, and then the second task is to restrain the governors.
And notice that we are willing to criticize our government. Americans are willing to criticize our government even when they are engaged in actions that, that protect us against aggressors, when they use force that's not morally justified.
Government must be under the moral law. I mean, how people say, well, you can't legislate morality. Well, of course, that's what law is. It's the legislation of morality, right? And it's rooted in a moral order, and if the government violates those rights, then it's wrong.
Government also has a role in promoting virtue among the citizens.
Our founders, men like Washington and Adams and Madison and Hamilton and Jefferson, bequeathed to us a wonderful system. It's a system that encourages deliberation and thinking and argument and persuasion before we vote.
Good ethics can make a difference in public affairs in terms of how we live as a society. I believe at the root of what it is that makes us good and just and decent is a recognition that we owe a debt to those who have gone before us.
Am I doing what's right? Am I doing what I could do for other people? Those other people who, like me, are made in the image and likeness of God.